Austin, you said it perfectly, what you wouldn't do. So I have to ask the question. All right, we're out here in Detroit. We deal with a lot of stuff. Obviously, the football team hasn't been very good for a very long time. What do I do here with this idea that secondary players are worthy of a top 3 pick?
I do think that if the Detroit Lions are staying at number 2 overall, they have to lock into edge.
Joining us is PFF's Director of Content and co-host of Tailgate, Austin Gayle. Guys, just as a clear, just so we're all on the same page this morning, PFF launched a 4-episode podcast series with the projected number 1 overall pick, Michigan's own Aidan Hutchinson, titled Hutch. Be sure to listen to Hutch wherever you listen to podcasts, and you can also check it out over on PFF's YouTube channel. Relive the magical Ohio State game, Aidan's bounce back from injury in 2020, along with interviews with some of the most prominent voices in football. Again, be sure to check out Hutch wherever you listen to podcasts. A must-listen before or after the NFL draft for any football fans, college or NFL. Austin, thanks so much for joining us. Austin, I watched it. I won't lie to you. My takeaway is as simple as this. If Aidan Hutchinson can live up to his character standards on the field, he's going to be a very special player. I mean, oh my goodness. I haven't seen that good of a guy come out at that position in a while.
No, I'm 100% with you. I think in that, in those interviews, I think what I identified is just a lot of traits that will last, right? You don't come out of a lot of interviews with prospects where you're saying, oh man, because he interviewed so well and he has this character, he's going to be a Hall of Famer. It's more that when people make comparisons, Aidan Hutchinson to Chris Long, Jared Allen, guys that maybe were never the best edge defenders in any single season of their careers, or compared to a Khalil Mack or a Von Miller or a Myles Garrett, but they lasted in the league for a long time and were uber productive across a long span. I think that's exactly the type of player Aidan Hutchinson is, because he has a lot of character, work ethic, athleticism, all these different things, a lot of traits that will last in this league. I think he's a super impressive human being, a super impressive player, and also someone with all the means to exceed his own expectations, right? He's 6'7", 260, an elite athlete, uber productive in the Big Ten, and he's done it in the big games. 15 pressures against Ohio State, 3 sacks, breaks his dad's record. I really don't think there's anything he can't do, and he also knows that and is confident in his own ability.
Absolutely. Austin, thanks so much again for joining us this morning. My takeaway from Aidan Hutchinson is this guy, it will be a franchise player, at least in the locker room. This is a guy that, every team needs it, Austin. Every team needs a guy where you look for and like, yeah, that is the embodiment of my football team. And when we discuss the Detroit Lions and possibly the Jaguars maybe taking Trayvon Walker number 1 overall, Aidan Hutchinson at number 2 feels like a shoo-in for me. If that is the reality, if that's how the board plays out, I think you take that card, Austin. You take off all your clothes, and you run to that podium.
I'm 100% with you. I think the Detroit Lions, the dream scenario for them is Aidan Hutchinson falls to number 2, right? And they're in a position to add a really talented edge player that is like the heart and soul of Michigan right now. He's from Dearborn, Michigan, played at Divine Child High School, was really successful as, I think, a slot receiver and edge defender there in high school. Obviously goes to the University of Michigan. His dad going to the University of Michigan. I think a lot of Detroit Lions fans would be ecstatic at the opportunity to have Aidan Hutchinson on their football team.
And obviously a lot of speculation about what the Jacksonville Jaguars are going to do here in Detroit, obviously, because so many people are in love with Aidan Hutchinson, including myself, and he's been the projected number 1 pick for a very long time. But with the recent rumors of Trayvon Walker being kind of in that consideration, and with Trent Baalke's past of falling in love with freak athletes like he's done in the past, how much of a chance do you give, if any, of the possibility of Aidan Hutchinson actually falling to number 2 overall?
I think the betting markets have it right? Aidan Hutchinson is minus 280 to go number 1 overall, and then Trayvon Walker, I think, is second in odds at plus 300. I think Baalke could very well strong arm a lot of the decision makers he has on his team and say, hey, I don't care. I want Trayvon Walker. I think he can be Myles Garrett and then some, right? That's what whose measurables really compared to. Trayvon Walker is very similar from a body type and athleticism perspective to a Myles Garrett. Now, he doesn't have any of the production that Garrett had coming out of Texas A&M, and a lot of that is role. He doesn't have a lot of experience. He's only played maybe a third of the career snaps that Aidan Hutchinson has. So a lot of him is projection, but in a league where they covet traits and uncoachable athleticism, he very well could go number 1 overall. And I think that would be the decision I wouldn't make at Jacksonville. I think you have to consider all your options, right? Thibodeau, Walker and Aidan Hutchinson. I think Aidan Hutchinson is not only the best player in this class, but also the best pick for the Jacksonville Jaguars. They could go a different direction, though. Walker is a freak athlete, right? I think Aidan is in his own right, but he doesn't have the same length, doesn't have the same explosiveness, right, that a Trayvon Walker does.
Austin, you said it perfectly. What you wouldn't do. So I have to ask the question. All right, we're out here in Detroit. We deal with a lot of stuff. Obviously, the football team hasn't been very good for a very long time. I've had to deal with the Kyle Hamilton #2 overall, and now Sauce Gardner because Mel Kiper's a jackass. What do I do here with this idea that secondary players are worthy of a top 3 pick?
I do think that if the Detroit Lions are staying at #2 overall, they have to lock into edge. Like, it has to be Walker, Thibodeau, or Hutchinson. Like, obviously they're not going to go offensive tackle with Taylor Decker and Penei Sewell there, and I don't think they're going to go quarterback. I think a lot of the conversation early on in the pre-draft process about them going Malik Willis at 2 was a lot of smoke to drive up the value of that #2 overall selection. What that told me is they're looking to potentially trade down, right? If they convince enough people that they're taking Willis at #2, maybe they'll get enough offers from Pittsburgh, Carolina, other teams that need quarterback, Saints, to come up and go get him before they're actually willing to take him. I don't think they're considering Ahmad Gardner at 2. I don't think they're considering Kyle Hamilton at 2. They are locking into edge or potentially trading down. I think those are really the only 2 options they have.
And obviously, for this draft at least, the quarterback class, a lot of people would agree, a little underwhelming. But again, we understand the quarterback is the most coveted position for any franchise. A lot of teams still now could use a quarterback. They could use a refresh button at that position. So in your opinion, just kind of looking around, not to analyze the players, but how many quarterbacks in your mind do you see actually going in the first round? Because at first it was Malik Willis, even possibly to Detroit at 2, and then you have Carolina, and now the rumors are they might fall later in the first round. How many quarterbacks do you see going in the first round? And if so, who's your first quarterback off the board?
I do think at least 3 quarterbacks go in the first round. And I know right now Malik Willis is the favorite to be the first quarterback taken, but I would not be surprised if the Lions do, in fact, pass on Malik Willis at #2 overall, that the first quarterback taken is Kenny Pickett to the Panthers at 6. Like, I would not be surprised by that. Matt Rule obviously offered Kenny Pickett when he was still coaching at Temple. Is a huge fan of his game, and I could see them locking into that quarterback. According to DraftKings Sportsbook, I mean, he's plus 150 to be a Panther. You don't see those low of odds for a team picking at 6 on a single player. Like, there is a lot of smoke that Kenny Pickett's going to be a Carolina Panther. So I ultimately think he could be the first quarterback out the board. I think 3 ultimately go. It's going to be Willis, Pickett, and then probably Ritter. On the outside looking in is probably Matt Corral of Ole Miss and then Sam Howell of UNC. And I think, this conversation has happened a ton in this pre-draft process, right? This quarterback class isn't good. It's underwhelming. I think, to be more specific, this quarterback class lacks polish. Malik Willis is such an unpolished quarterback prospect. Sam Howell, unpolished. Desmond Ritter, unpolished. Not Desmond Ritter, Kenny Pickett, unpolished. You need to improve so much of their game for them to be elite starters in the NFL. And the NFL objectively has a development problem at that position. The expectations for a rookie quarterback are not what they were 15 years ago, like sitting behind a veteran and playing things out. The initiation of the rookie contract that allows for teams to have such a cheap player at the most valuable position forces them onto the football field earlier, right? Because you want to maximize this window where your quarterback, who on average should make $30 million a year, is only making about a couple mil. And you have that now you need polish at that position out of the gate. And now when you have quarterback prospects like a Willis, like a Corral, like a Howell, that need to get so much better in the NFL, it's unnerving, right? It doesn't make it easier to take a Malik Willis at #2, knowing that his first few years in the league might not be great because he needs so much development in the NFL.
Austin, thank you so much, man. That is awesome. I have one more question before we got to let you go. Wide receivers have never been more important in the NFL, and we're seeing obviously they're getting paid now, the second highest paid position if you go off the top 10 average salary. My question to you is, we talk about Drake London, Garrett Wilson, Chris Olave, some of the better receivers in this class. Are we going to see a record number of wide receivers taken in the first round? One, given the trend of you need wide receivers in the NFL, in today's NFL, at least given how friendly the rules are. Number 2, of the wide receiver class, which one is, I would say, the most interesting? Which one are you looking at maybe isn't getting enough attention, or maybe is getting enough attention and is deservedly so?
Yeah, I think at least 6 receivers come off the board in the first round. And some of that is because it's a really good receiver class. I think there's a lot of high-end wide receiver 2 talents in this draft class. I don't think a lot of them are I wouldn't rank any of these receivers ahead of Jamar Chase, Jalen Waddle, or Devontae Smith in the previous year's class. But I think there are a lot of high-end wide receiver 2 outcomes from a Drake London, Garrett Wilson, Chris Olave, Jamison Williams, Treylon Burks. And then after that, I think Christian Watson could slip into the first round. Sky Moore of Western Michigan, George Pickens of Georgia, one of those guys will. When you look at the teams drafting at the back end of the first, Packers need a receiver. Chiefs need a receiver, and both those teams have 2 picks. So I do think that you'll ultimately see at least 6 come off the board. I think probably one of the more underrated receivers in this class is Sky Moore of Western Michigan. I think if he played for a Power 5 school, he'd be a consensus first rounder. People are doubting him because a little bit younger coming out, so he didn't have an opportunity to play at any of the All-Star Bowl games, like the Senior Bowl or the East West Shrine Bowl, and he hasn't had the level of competition that the other guys have. But I love what he can do. 1.47, 10-yard split. That's 97th percentile among receivers. He's a special player with enough shake to stick it out on the outside, even though he's 5'10". I think he's one of the more underrated players in this class.
Austin, thank you so much for joining us this morning. Everybody, please, at home, check out PFF's YouTube channel or search Hutch or PFF anywhere you listen to podcasts to check out their new 4-episode podcast series called Hutch. Check it out, guys. Again, Austin, thank you so much. Could you just tell our fans and audience at home a little snippet of what they can expect tuning into this 4-part miniseries?
Yeah, absolutely. Check it out wherever you get your podcasts. It's also on PFF's YouTube channel. And, I think the best part of it, right, is you go game by game with, the University of Michigan's best football player last year. And you hear about, all the intricacies of that season and beating Ohio State, beating Iowa, the pre-draft process for Aidan Hutchinson. And if you go back and listen to the first 2 episodes, it talks about his childhood and his upbringing and his first few years at Michigan under Don Brown, working with Kwity Paye and Rashawn Gary. I mean, it's a podcast made for Michigan fans. It's a podcast made for whoever the fans that take Aidan Hutchinson.
Awesome. Well, Austin, thank you so much. Again, everybody, ladies and gentlemen, PFF's Director of Content and co-host of Tailgate, Austin Gayle from PFF. Thank you so much again, Austin. Got to have you back on soon. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. Thank you.
I finished the whole thing yesterday.
Binging it?
Yeah, I finished the whole thing yesterday.
Oh, you were up late last night.
No remorse. I don't care. This is the first time I've binge watched something or anything, I would say, in like 6 years.
Good for you.
Yeah. I was having a night. It's quite the night. She
You were
got text
watching-
messages from me at like 2 in the morning.
Yes, I did.
So we got to go to break.
You were watching football with me.
Shut up, fish. Never. Just never.